In an aging orchard on the outskirts of Pine Grove, where apple trees whispered secrets of simpler times, destiny was about to play its hand. Jack Morrison had lived his entire life making the practical choice, the responsible choice. Each morning began with packing his daughter's lunch. Each evening ended with tallying bills at their modest kitchen table. But on this unseasonably warm Tuesday evening, as he dropped Sarah off at her grandmother's before his night shift, the air crackled with something different. The sound came first, angry buzzing mixed with the metallic crunch of twisting metal. Then the screams, desperate primal, cutting through the twilight air. What Jack did next would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Pine Grove. For in that overturned luxury car, surrounded by a vengeful swarm of killer bees, lay a woman whose true identity would rewrite their story forever. But who is this mysterious woman, and why do her eyes hold such profound sadness despite her apparent wealth? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the threadbare curtains of Jack Morrison's small rental house, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. At 38, his face carried the weathered lines of a man who'd shouldered more than his share of life's burdens. But his eyes remained bright with purpose. The aroma of slightly burnt toast and instant coffee filled the modest kitchen as he prepared breakfast, his movements precise and practiced from years of morning routines. "Sarah, better hurry up, kiddo. Toast is getting cold." He called up the narrow staircase, his voice carrying the gentle authority of a father who'd learned to be both parent and friend. Footsteps thundered down the stairs as 12-year-old Sarah burst into the kitchen, her backpack already slung over one shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore the determined expression she'd inherited from her mother. "Dad, you won't believe what I got on my biology test." She thrust a paper toward him, her eyes shining with pride. Jack wiped his hands on a dish towel and took the test, his face breaking into a wide smile at the bright red A+ marked at the top. "That's my girl." He pulled her into a tight hug, feeling the familiar ache in his chest. How Rebecca would have loved to see this moment. The old family photo album sat on the shelf above the kitchen table, its spine cracked and worn from frequent handling. Inside, frozen moments told the story of their family. Jack and Rebecca's wedding day, Sarah's birth, picnics in the park, and finally, the last photo they'd taken together as a family before Rebecca's illness took her away. 5 years had passed, but some mornings, Jack still reached across the empty side of the bed, forgetting for a moment that she was gone. Sarah caught him looking at the album and touched his arm. "I wish Mom could see my test too," she said softly. Jack cleared his throat, pushing back the familiar wave of grief. "She sees it, sweetheart, and she's just as proud as I am." He checked his watch and quickly changed the subject. "Now, finish up that toast. We've got exactly 12 minutes before we need to head out." Sarah slid into her chair, attacking her breakfast with the efficiency of someone who'd grown up on a tight schedule. As she ate, she thumbed through a glossy college brochure that had somehow found its way onto their kitchen table. "Johns Hopkins has the best pre-med program in the country," she announced between bites. Jack's heart clenched at the sight of the brochure. The cost of medical school loomed like a mountain in his mind, but he forced a smile. "One step at a time, kiddo. Let's get through middle school first." The morning light caught the stack of bills peeking out from beneath yesterday's newspaper. Electric, gas, rent, Sarah's orthodontist payments. Jack had arranged them in order of urgency, a skill he'd perfected over the years. His job as maintenance supervisor at Pine Grove Community Center covered the basics, and his evening security guard shifts at the local mall filled in some gaps. But dreams like medical school seemed as distant as the stars. Through the kitchen window, Jack could see Mrs. Chen from next door tending to her garden. She always had a kind word for Sarah and occasionally brought over homemade dumplings, claiming she made too many for just herself. Jack knew better. She'd seen him coming home late from his second job too many times not to understand their situation. Sarah finished her breakfast and rinsed her plate, another habit born from years of watching her father juggle responsibilities. "Ready, Dad," she announced, hefting her backpack. "Don't forget, I'm staying at Grandma's tonight because of your late shift." Jack nodded, gathering his own things. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders as he locked up their small house. But watching Sarah bounce down the front steps, her ponytail swinging with each movement, he felt the surge of pride that made it all worthwhile. She was smart, kind, and determined, everything her mother had been. Whatever it took, he'd make sure she had the chances Rebecca would have wanted for her. As they pulled out of the driveway in their aging Honda, neither of them could have known that by nightfall their carefully ordered world would be turned upside down. Sometimes life's biggest changes come on the most ordinary of days, carried in on the wings of chance, or in their case, on the angry buzz of 1,000 killer bees. The Pine Grove Community Center hummed with early morning activity as Jack made his rounds. His footsteps echoed through the empty basketball court where he'd just finished repairing a loose floorboard. The maintenance cart squeaked along beside him, tools rattling with each movement, constant companions in his daily battle against entropy. "Morning, Jack," called Martha from the front desk. The elderly volunteer's voice carried the warmth of someone who'd watched the community grow for decades. "The pool heater's acting up again." Jack nodded, already reaching for his toolbox. "Third time this month. I'll take care of it." He didn't mention that he'd been watching tutorial videos on his phone during lunch breaks, learning the intricacies of pool heating systems to avoid calling in expensive professionals. Another small victory in the endless war against mounting bills. The stack of past due notices in his locker seemed to grow thicker each week. Electric bill, car insurance, Sarah's upcoming school trip to the Science Museum, each one a weight pressing down on his shoulders. He'd developed a system, rotating payments like a juggler, keeping plates spinning in the air. Pay the most urgent, negotiate extensions on others, and somehow keep their small world from falling apart. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother-in-law, Grace. Sarah forgot her science project materials. "Don't worry, I'll pick them up before getting her from school." Jack smiled, grateful for the millionth time for Grace's support. After Rebecca passed, she'd become their anchor, watching Sarah during his evening shifts at the mall, never once making him feel like less of a father for needing help. The afternoon. Sun slanted through the community center's windows as Jack finished with the pool heater. His clothes were damp with sweat, but there was satisfaction in fixing things, in making them work again. If only life's bigger problems could be solved with a wrench and some patience. "You're a godsend, Jack," Martha called as he packed up his tools. "Don't know what we'd do without you." He waved off the compliment, but her words warmed him. The community center had become more than just a job. It was where Sarah learned to swim, where they'd found support after Rebecca's passing, where neighbors became family. The transition between his day job and evening security shift was always tight. Jack wolfed down a sandwich in his car, changed into his guard uniform in the mall's employee bathroom, and clocked in just as the evening shift began. The fluorescent lights of Pine Grove Mall cast everything in an artificial glow, turning minutes into hours as he patrolled the quiet corridors. "Hey, Morrison." Chuck, his supervisor, waved him over. "Got a situation in the food court. Some kids causing trouble." Jack headed toward the commotion, his steps measured and calm. He'd learned early that most situations could be diffused with the right approach. Sure enough, he found 3 teenagers trying to stack chairs into an elaborate pyramid. "Evening, folks," he said, keeping his voice friendly but firm. "Let's find something else to do with those chairs, all right?" The kids grumbled but complied, something in Jack's steady gaze suggesting he wouldn't be swayed. As he helped them put the chairs back, he caught a glimpse of himself in the darkened shop windows, uniform slightly worn at the edges, circles under his eyes that seemed to deepen each month. Not for the first time, he wondered what Rebecca would think of their life now. His phone buzzed again. A photo from Grace. Sarah working on her science project, tongue stuck out in concentration, just like her mother used to do when focused on a task. The sight gave him a second wind, reminding him why he pushed through these long days. The mall's closing announcement echoed through the nearly empty corridors. Jack began his final rounds, checking doors, making sure everything was secure. His feet ached, but he'd learned to ignore such minor discomforts. The night shift paid an extra $1.50 per hour, another small victory in the constant battle to make ends meet. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, a parent-teacher conference. During his lunch break, a leaky roof at the community center to fix, bills to juggle. But for now, Jack focused on each step, each task, each small piece of the puzzle that was keeping their world together. As he walked to his car after his shift, the night air was unusually warm for early spring. The old Honda's engine protested as he turned the key, reminding him that it would need attention soon, another expense to somehow accommodate. But the car had been Rebecca's too, and somehow that made its quirks more endearing than annoying. The drive to Grace's house was quiet. The streets of Pine Grove empty, except for the occasional delivery truck preparing for morning rounds. Jack's thoughts drifted to Sarah's college brochure, to the dreams she was already building. He'd find a way, he promised himself. Somehow he'd find a way to make those dreams possible. Little did he know, as he pulled into Grace's driveway, that fate had already set in motion events that would change everything. Sometimes the universe has its own plans, and all our careful scheduling, all our meticulous juggling of responsibilities, becomes nothing more than a prelude to something far greater than we could have imagined. The old Miller orchard had seen better days. Once the pride of Pine Grove, its neat rows of apple trees had gradually surrendered to neglect after old Jim Miller's passing. Jack noticed the crushed beekeeper's hat lying in the tall grass as he pulled up to Grace's house, a relic of the days when the orchard's honey was as famous as its apples. Sarah bounded down Grace's front steps, her science project materials spread across the dining room table, visible through the window. "Just 5 more minutes, Dad. I'm almost done with the solar system model." "Take your time, kiddo." Jack leaned against his car, enjoying the warmth of the evening sun. The air was thick with the scent of apple blossoms, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark called. It was the kind of peaceful moment that made all the long hours worthwhile. The first sign that something was wrong was subtle. A change in the evening chorus of birds, a sudden silence falling over the orchard. Then came the sound that would change everything. Tires screeching, metal groaning, and the angry drone of disturbed bees. Jack was running before his mind fully registered what he'd heard. The crash had come from deeper in the orchard, where the old access road curved through the trees. "Stay here," he shouted back to Sarah and Grace, who had appeared on the porch. The scene that greeted him sent ice through his veins. A sleek black car lay on its side, crumpled against an ancient apple tree, but it was the dark clouds surrounding the vehicle that made his heart stop. Thousands of angry bees, their hum filling the air like an engine about to explode. Through the spider-webbed glass of the driver's window, he caught a glimpse of movement. Someone was alive inside. Without hesitation, Jack stripped off his jacket, wrapping it around his head and leaving only his eyes exposed. The old beekeeper's hat lay just out of reach, rendered useless by whatever had crushed it earlier. "Hold on!" he shouted, hoping his voice would carry through the chaos. "I'm coming to help!" The first sting caught him on the wrist as he approached. The car, then another on his neck and a third on his cheek. Each step brought more pain, but Jack pushed through it, focused entirely on reaching the trapped driver. The window was too damaged to open. Using his protected elbow, Jack smashed through the glass, feeling it give way under repeated strikes. The sound seemed to enrage the swarm further, and the air grew thick with attacking insects. Inside the car, a woman was struggling with her seatbelt, her movements becoming more panicked as bees found their way inside. Her eyes met Jack's, wide, with terror and something else, a deep, profound sadness that struck him even in the midst of chaos. "Cover your face with your hands," Jack commanded, his voice steady despite the burning pain of multiple stings. The woman complied immediately, and Jack reached in, fighting with the jammed seatbelt mechanism. Each second felt like an eternity as the swarm pressed in around them. Finally, the belt released. Jack reached in, ignoring the searing pain across his exposed skin, and pulled the woman toward him. She was lighter than he expected, moving with a natural grace, even in crisis. As she emerged from the wreck, Jack did the only thing he could think of. He wrapped his arms around her, using his own body as a shield against the furious swarm. "Keep your face covered and stay close to me," he instructed, beginning the agonizing retreat toward Grace's house. Each step was a battle against pain and disorientation. The bees seemed to target any exposed flesh they could find, and Jack could feel his face and hands swelling from the stings. Grace appeared at the edge of the orchard, armed with her garden hose. The powerful spray created a barrier between them and the worst of the swarm, giving Jack and the mysterious woman the coverage they needed to make it to safety. "Inside, quickly," Grace urged, holding the screen door open. They stumbled into the house, and Sarah slammed the door behind them, trapping the few bees that had followed them in the mesh screen. It was only then, in the safety of Grace's living room, that Jack got his first real look at the woman he'd rescued. Despite the dirt and scratches from the accident, there was an unmistakable elegance about her. Her clothes, though disheveled, spoke of wealth, and the watch on her wrist probably cost more than his car. "Are you hurt?" he asked, trying to focus through the burning pain of dozens of stings. "I'm okay," she replied softly, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "Because of you." She touched his arm gently, her eyes widening at the sight of his swollen skin. "But you're not. You need medical attention." Grace was already on the phone with emergency services, her voice clear and commanding as she described the situation. Sarah appeared with her grandmother's first aid kit, her face pale but determined. "Dad, you're supposed to remove the stingers." "Quickly," she recited, clearly drawing on recently acquired knowledge. "It helps reduce the venom." Jack managed to smile despite the pain. "That's my girl, always remembering the important stuff." As Sarah and Grace worked to tend his injuries, Jack noticed the woman watching them, with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was gratitude there, certainly, but also something deeper, a longing, perhaps, for something beyond his understanding. "I'm Jack," he offered, wincing as Sarah carefully removed another stinger. "Jack Morrison." The woman seemed to hesitate for a moment before responding. "Elena," she said simply, offering no last name. "Thank you, Jack Morrison. What you did." She trailed off, emotion catching in her throat. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The sun was setting now, painting Grace's living room in shades of gold and casting long shadows across Elena's face. Jack couldn't have known it then, but this moment, him swollen and in pain, Sarah playing nurse, Grace keeping watch at the window, and the mysterious Elena perched uncertainly on the edge of their familiar world, was the pivot point around which their entire future would turn. Sometimes the biggest changes in our lives come disguised as ordinary moments of courage. And sometimes, in saving another person's life, we end up saving something in ourselves we didn't even know needed saving. The paramedics insisted on taking both Jack and Elena to Pine Grove General, despite Elena's quiet protests that she was fine. In the harsh, fluorescent lights of the emergency room, Jack could see her more clearly now. She wore no jewelry except for a simple silver band on her right hand, and her clothes, though obviously expensive, were intentionally understated. She kept checking a cracked smartphone, her fingers moving swiftly across the damaged screen. "Mr. Morrison," the ER doctor said, examining the numerous stings on his face and arms. "You're lucky. Despite the number of stings, you're not showing signs of a severe allergic reaction. Still, we'd like to keep you under observation for a few hours." From the next curtained bay, Elena's voice drifted over. "Please, I need to make some calls. My phone, it's not working properly." "Ma'am," another doctor responded, "you've experienced a car accident and multiple bee stings. The calls can wait." Jack smiled, despite his discomfort. There was something endearingly human about Elena's frustration with technology at a moment like this. It reminded him of Rebecca's constant battles with their old desktop computer. Sarah and Grace had followed the ambulance to the hospital. Now, Sarah sat beside his bed, holding his hand carefully between the stings. "Dad, that was like something from a superhero movie," she whispered, her eyes still wide with excitement and lingering concern. "More like a horror movie," Grace corrected. But her proud smile betrayed her true feelings, though I suppose every parent becomes a superhero when needed. A soft knock interrupted them. Elena stood in the entrance to Jack's curtained area, looking somehow elegant despite the hospital gown and residual dirt from the accident. "May I come in?" "Of course," Jack said, trying to sit up straighter and immediately regretting the movement. Elena approached his bed, her bare feet silent on the linoleum floor. Up close, Jack noticed that her eyes were an unusual shade of amber, and despite her composed demeanor, there was a vulnerability in them that tugged at something in his chest. "I needed to thank you properly," she said, her accent more noticeable, now that the crisis had passed. "What you did, most people would have run the other way. Anyone would have helped," Jack replied, but Elena shook her head. "No, Mr. Morrison, not anyone would have done what you did." She glanced at Sarah, then back to Jack. "You have a beautiful family." Sarah beamed at the compliment, but Jack noticed how Elena's voice caught slightly on the word family. There was a story there, hidden behind her careful composure. "I'm Sarah," his daughter volunteered, "and this is my grandma Grace. Are you okay? The bees didn't sting you too much, did they?" Elena's face softened as she addressed Sarah directly. "I'm fine, thanks to your father. You must be very proud of him." "I am," Sarah said simply, and Jack felt his heart swell. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. A man in an expensive suit appeared, slightly out of breath. "Ms. Chen, thank goodness. When we lost contact—" "It's all right, James." Elena cut him off smoothly, but Jack noticed how she tensed slightly. "Everything is fine, though I'll need a new phone." The man, James, looked around the curtained area, taking in Jack's swollen face, Sarah's curious expression, and Grace's watchful gaze. "Should I call the lawyers? The PR team?" "No," Elena said firmly. "That won't be necessary." She turned back to Jack. "Though I would like your contact information, Mr. Morrison, for insurance purposes, of course." There was something in the way she said it that suggested insurance was the least of her concerns, but Jack simply nodded. Grace found a pen and paper in her purse, and he wrote down their address and phone number. As Elena took the paper, her fingers brushed his. Despite the clinical setting and the lingering pain of the stings, Jack felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. Their eyes met briefly, and he saw something flash across her face. Recognition, perhaps, of the same strange connection. "I should let you rest," Elena said, stepping back, "but I'll be in touch." She paused at the curtain. "Thank you again, Jack Morrison, for everything." After she left, Sarah whispered, "Dad, did you see her watch? It looked super expensive." Sarah, Grace, admonished gently, "It's not polite to notice such things." But Jack's attention was on Elena's retreating figure, visible through the gap in the curtain. James hovered at her elbow, speaking rapidly into a phone, while Elena stood straight and still, like an island of calm in the hospital's chaos. Just before she turned the corner, she glanced back, catching Jack's eye one last time. The moment passed quickly, but it left Jack with an odd feeling, as if the neat, ordered world he'd built for himself and Sarah had suddenly shifted slightly. On its axis, he couldn't have known then how right that feeling was, or how completely Elena Chen would transform their lives. "Dad," Sarah's voice brought him back to the present. "Your face looks like a balloon." Jack laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his swollen skin. "Thanks for that observation, kiddo. Really helps a guy's ego." But as Grace and Sarah fussed over him, Jack's thoughts kept drifting back to Elena, to the sadness in her eyes, the grace in her movements, and the mysteries that seemed to surround her like a gentle fog. Something told him this wasn't the last time their paths would cross, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, that thought made the pain of his stings a little easier to bear. In her penthouse suite at the Grand Plaza Hotel in downtown Pine Grove, Elena Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the small town's lights twinkle below. Her laptop displayed the latest Tech Innovator magazine, her own face on. The cover, Elena Chen, the reclusive genius behind tomorrow's technology. She closed it with a gentle click. "James," she called softly, and her assistant materialized at her side. "What have you found out about him?" James consulted his tablet. "Jack Morrison, age 38, widowed 5 years ago when his wife Rebecca passed. Away from complications of lymphoma. One daughter, Sarah, age 12, straight-A student with aspirations toward medical school. He works 2 jobs, maintenance supervisor at the Pine Grove Community Center and evening security guard at the local mall." Elena nodded, absently touching the bee stings on her arm. "His financial situation? Struggling but managing. Multiple, small loans, all paid on time despite tight circumstances. The daughter's orthodontic bills and some remaining medical expenses from his wife's illness are his largest debts." James paused. "He's never missed a day of work at either job." The corner of Elena's mouth lifted slightly. Of course he hadn't. Everything she'd seen of Jack Morrison spoke of responsibility and quiet determination. "And there's been no recognition? No one's connected me to the accident?" "No, Ms. Chen. The local paper ran a small story about the bee incident. But your name wasn't mentioned. The hospital staff was discreet, and the police report lists you simply as E. Chen. Your privacy remains intact." Elena turned from the window, wincing slightly as her bruised ribs protested the movement. "Good. I'd like to keep it that way for now." She picked up her new phone, the latest prototype from her own company, not yet available to the public. The background photo showed the vast Chen Technologies campus in Silicon Valley, a gleaming monument to innovation that employed over 50,000 people. The empire she'd built from nothing, starting with a single brilliant algorithm in her and college dorm room. "The board meeting," she asked, though she already knew the answer, "postponed until next week as requested." Though Mr. Richardson was displeased, Elena allowed herself a small smile. Thomas Richardson, her COO, was always displeased when she exercised her authority as majority shareholder. He'd been pushing for more public appearances, more interviews, more FaceTime with investors. He didn't understand her need for privacy, her desire to work in peace. "Have you looked into the community center where Jack works?" James nodded. "Aging facility, tight budget. They're at risk of losing their after-school program funding." Elena sat at her desk, her fingers moving swiftly across her laptop's keyboard. Within moments, she'd accessed the center's financial records. The numbers told a story of dedicated people doing their best with limited resources, just like Jack Morrison himself. "Ms. Chen," James said hesitantly, "if I may, you seem quite interested in this man. He saved my life, James." She touched her ribs again, remembering how Jack had shielded her with his own body, without a thought for himself. "When was the last time you saw someone do something purely selfless?" The question hung in the air between them. In Elena's world of corporate takeovers and technological innovation, genuine altruism was as rare as unicorns. She opened a drawer and withdrew the piece of paper with Jack's contact information, written in his steady hand. The corner was slightly stained with antiseptic from the hospital. Such a small thing, but it represented something she hadn't experienced in years, a genuine connection, unmarred by knowledge of her wealth or status. "What about the daughter?" Elena asked. "Sarah?" James brightened. "Fascinating girl. Top of her class in science and mathematics. She recently won the regional science fair with a project on sustainable energy. Her teachers say she has exceptional potential, but resources are limited, Elena finished. She understood that story all too well, remembering her own childhood struggles before her breakthrough. A notification popped up on her screen, another message from Thomas Richardson about the upcoming product launch. Elena dismissed it with a gesture. Let him wait. For the first time in years, something had captured her attention that had nothing to do with market shares or technological innovation. James, I want you to set up a charitable foundation. Anonymous donor. First project will be renovating the Pine Grove Community Center, with particular focus on their youth programs. Of course, Ms. Chen. James made notes on his tablet. And the timing? Elena thought of Jack's face when he looked at his daughter, the pride and worry warring in his eyes. Immediate but quiet. No press, no announcements. I want to see something first. See what? She turned back to the window, to the small town that had accidentally become the setting for what felt like a turning point in her life. I want to see if it's possible to help someone without money changing everything, to make a difference without power getting in the way. James cleared his throat. And Mr. Morrison? Should I arrange another meeting? Elena touched the window, her reflection overlaying the town lights below. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember how it felt to be simply Elena, a woman saved by a brave man, rather than Elena Chen, the tech billionaire whose every move was scrutinized by the business world. No, she said finally. Let's let fate take its course. After all, she smiled, remembering the look in Jack's eyes when he'd pulled her from the car. It's done a pretty good job so far. The morning Pine Grove woke up to a fleet of black SUVs and a sleek private jet parked at their small regional airport. Jack was fixing a leaky pipe under the community center's kitchen sink. The first hint that something extraordinary was happening came from Martha's excited voice. Jack! Jack, you need to see this! He emerged from under the sink, wiping his hands on a rag, to find Martha transfixed by the small TV in the break room. On screen, a news reporter stood outside the Miller orchard, where the bee incident had occurred just a week ago. Confirmations. The tech billionaire Elena Chen, founder and CEO of Chen Technologies, was involved in last week's accident. Sources say Ms. Chen, known for her reclusive nature and technological innovations, was saved by a local maintenance worker. The wrench slipped from Jack's hand, clattering on the floor. On the screen was Elena, his Elena, but transformed. She wore a tailored business suit, her presence commanding as she stepped out of a helicopter. The caption beneath read, Elena. Chen, net worth $32.8 billion. Jack, Martha whispered, isn't that the woman you saved from the bees? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. An unknown number, but somehow he knew who it would be. Hello, Jack. Elena's voice was exactly as he remembered it, though now he detected a weight in it he hadn't noticed before. I think perhaps we should talk. Yeah, he managed, still staring at her image on the TV. I think we should. I'm at the orchard. Would you join me? The drive to Miller's orchard felt surreal. Jack passed 3 more news vans and a gathering crowd of onlookers. At the entrance, a security team in dark suits checked his ID before waving him through. Elena stood beneath the apple tree where her car had crashed, looking exactly like her TV image, except for one detail. When she saw Jack approach, her composed expression softened into the same genuine smile he remembered from the hospital. I'm sorry, she said before he could speak. I should have told you who I was. Jack looked at the private jet visible in the distance, the security detail, the waiting helicopter. Might have been worth mentioning. Would it have changed anything? Would you have acted differently that day? He thought about it, remembering the chaos of the moment, the instinct to help regardless of who was in that car. No, he admitted. But why keep it secret afterward? Elena's fingers traced the bark of the apple tree. Because for the first time in years, someone saw me, just me. Not the company, not the money, not the reclusive tech genius the media loves to speculate about. She met his eyes. Do you know how rare that is? Before Jack could respond, a familiar voice called out, Dad! Dad, you're not going to believe—" Sarah stopped short as she ran up, her eyes widening at the sight of Elena. You're Elena Chen. I just read about you in my science magazine. You invented the quantum processing algorithm that revolutionized artificial intelligence. Elena's face lit up. And you must be the science fair winner I've heard about. Your sustainable energy project was quite impressive. Sarah's jaw dropped. You know about my project? I make it my business to know about promising young scientists. Elena glanced at Jack. Especially when their fathers saved my life. A man in an expensive suit, James from the hospital, approached with a tablet. Miss Chen, the board is waiting. For your video call. Tell them to keep waiting. Elena's tone was gentle but firm. This is more important. She turned back to Jack and Sarah. I have a proposition for both of you. No strings attached, just possibilities. She led them to a white tent that had been set up nearby. Inside, laid out on a table, were architectural plans. Jack recognized the building immediately. That's the community center, he said, studying the detailed renovations marked in blue. An anonymous donor is funding a complete renovation, Elena explained, including a state-of-the-art STEM lab for the after-school program. She smiled at Sarah. Every future doctor needs proper equipment to learn with. Jack felt overwhelmed. Elena, I can't. You're not. The donation was already arranged before today. This is about something else. She took a deep breath. I'm tired of hiding, Jack. Tired of running my company from behind screens and proxy statements. What happened here, in this orchard? It reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Sometimes the best things in life come from taking risks, from letting people in. A gentle breeze stirred the tent flaps, carrying the sweet scent of apple blossoms. In the distance, the gathered media waited, their cameras ready to capture whatever story was unfolding in this unlikely meeting of two worlds. I'm not looking in for a fairy tale, Elena continued. I'm looking for something real. The man who would run into a swarm of bees to save a stranger. The girl who dreams of curing diseases. The kind of genuine humanity that no amount of money can buy. She met Jack's gaze steadily. I'd like to get to know you both, properly this time. No secrets, no hidden identities, just us. Sarah clutched her father's arm, practically vibrating. With excitement, Jack looked at Elena, really looked at her, and saw past the powerful CEO to the woman who had touched his arm so gently in Grace's living room, who had looked back at him from the hospital corridor with such genuine connection. Well, he said finally, a smile tugging at his lips, I suppose we could start with dinner. I make a mean spaghetti and meatballs. Elena's laugh was bright and real, drawing smiles from even her serious security team. Spaghetti and meatballs. Sounds perfect. As they walked back toward the gathered media, Elena's hand found Jack's, their fingers intertwining naturally. Sarah bounded ahead, already peppered Elena with questions about quantum computing and artificial intelligence. And there, in the same orchard where their story had begun, surrounded by the buzz of reporters rather than bees, a new chapter was about to unfold. Because sometimes the greatest adventures start with a simple act of courage, and the most valuable things in life can't be measured in billions. That evening, after the media circus had finally died down, Jack sat alone in his kitchen, turning his old wedding ring over and over in his hands. The gold band caught the dim light, bringing back memories of a simpler time. Rebecca's photo smiled at him from its familiar place on the shelf, and for the first time in years, he felt the need to talk to her about something other than Sarah. You wouldn't believe the day I've had, Beck, he whispered to the empty kitchen. A billionaire, who'd have thought? The sound of footsteps on the stairs made him quickly pocket the ring. Sarah appeared in her pajamas, her face still glowing with excitement from the day's events. Dad, can't sleep. She slid into the chair across from him. I keep thinking about what Ms. Chen said about the STEM lab. Do you think she really meant it? Jack smiled, pushing aside his own tumultuous thoughts. Elena seems like someone who means what she says. Elena, Sarah tested the name, grinning. You're on a first-name basis with one of the most brilliant minds in technology. Do you know her net worth is more than the GDP of some small countries? Sarah, and did you see the way she looked at you, like in those romance movies Grandma watches? Jack felt his face warm. It's complicated, kiddo. Because of Mom? Sarah's voice softened, and sometimes Jack forgot how perceptive his 12-year-old could be. The ring felt heavy in his pocket. Partly, he admitted, and partly because Elena's world is very different from ours. But she doesn't care about that. She likes us for who we are. Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. Mum would want you to be happy, you know. A knock at the door saved Jack from having to respond. Grace stood on their porch, holding a casserole dish, and wearing an expression that suggested she had a lot to say. I brought dinner, she announced, sweeping into the kitchen, since I figured you'd both be too overwhelmed to cook. Sarah, honey, why don't you go get ready for bed? I need to talk to your father. Once Sarah had reluctantly retreated upstairs, Grace turned to Jack. So? A billionaire, Grace. No, let me finish. She sat down, her face serious. I've watched you these past 5 years, Jack. Watched you pour every ounce of yourself into raising Sarah, into keeping Rebecca's memory alive. You've done an amazing job, but Rebecca wouldn't want you to stop living. Jack touched the ring in his pocket. I haven't stopped living. You know what I mean. Grace reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. I saw how you looked at Elena today, and more importantly, I saw how she looked at you. That woman isn't interested in your bank account or your social status. She sees what Rebecca saw, a good man with a huge heart. It's not that simple, Jack protested. Her world, you should have seen all those cameras today. The security teams, the private jet. How could I ever fit into that? Maybe you're asking the wrong question, Grace suggested. Maybe the question is, how could you not try? For Sarah's sake, if nothing else. That woman could open doors for her that we've only dreamed about. I don't want Elena's money. No, and that's exactly why she's interested in you. Grace stood, moving to the shelf where Rebecca's photo sat. You know, Rebecca once told me something about you. She said you were so afraid of making the wrong choice that sometimes you forgot to make any choice at all. Jack felt the truth of those words hit home. Rebecca had always been able to see right through him. I'm not saying leap without looking, Grace continued, but I am saying don't let fear of the unknown keep you from something potentially wonderful. Sarah needs to see that it's okay to take chances in life, to open your heart even when it's scary. She picked up Rebecca's photo, running her finger along the frame. My daughter loved you completely, Jack. She also knew you better than anyone. Do you really think she'd want you to turn away from a chance at happiness because you're worried about what people might think? The ring in Jack's pocket seemed to grow lighter. He remembered the way Elena had looked at him in the orchard, how she'd spoken about wanting something real. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Thank you for today, for being exactly who you are. Grace glanced at the message and smiled. You know, sometimes life gives us second chances, not to replace what we've lost, but to build something new alongside those precious memories. Before Jack could respond, Sarah called down from upstairs. Dad, Miss Chen is on the news again. They're calling it the Billionaire romance. Despite himself, Jack laughed. The sound surprised him, warm and genuine, like something long dormant coming back to life. Well, Grace said, heading for the door. At least they're not calling it Beauty and the Bees, though I'm sure that headline's coming. After she left, Jack took out his phone and looked at Elena's message again. Below it was a photo she'd sent earlier, Sarah excitedly showing her the science fair project, both of their faces lit up with shared enthusiasm. He reached for the ring in his pocket one last time, then slowly stood and walked to Rebecca's photo. What do you think, Beck? He whispered. Is it time? The photo just smiled back at him, but somehow, in the quiet of his kitchen, that felt like answer enough. Sometimes moving forward doesn't mean leaving the past behind. It means making room in your heart for new chapters while keeping the old ones safe. Jack picked up his phone and began to type, "Thank you for being exactly who you are too. Dinner tomorrow? I wasn't kidding about those meatballs." Elena's response came almost immediately. "I can't wait. And Jack, bring Sarah. Some of my engineers are dying to hear about her sustainable energy ideas." Upstairs, he could hear Sarah chattering excitedly on the phone with her best friend about the STEM lab. Outside, a few persistent photographers still lingered, hoping for one more shot of the unlikely couple. And in his heart, for the first time in 5 years, Jack felt the stirring of something that felt a lot like hope. The Pine Grove Gazette's headline screamed across the morning paper, "Local hero captures tech billionaire's heart." Below it, a photo showed Jack and Elena walking through the orchard, their hands clasped, Sarah bouncing excitedly ahead of them. The small-town newspaper, usually concerned with bake sales and local council meetings, had suddenly found itself at the center of a national story. Jack couldn't even get his morning coffee at May's diner without being ambushed by reporters. They had questions about everything: his heroic rescue, his relationship with Elena, his plans for the future. The quiet life he'd built was evaporating like morning dew under the harsh spotlight of public attention. "Mr. Morrison, is it true? You're already engaged?" "Jack, over here. How does it feel to be dating one of the richest women in tech? What about your daughter? How is she adjusting to instant fame?" The questions followed him everywhere, but it was the headlines that really got to him. From maintenance man to millionaire's match, Cinderella story, how killer bees led to true love. Each one seemed determined to paint their story as some kind of fairy tale, missing the real people behind the sensational headlines. Elena had tried to shield them from the worst of it. Her security team kept the more aggressive paparazzi at bay, and she'd arranged for a private entrance at Sarah's school to avoid the cameras. But in a town as small as Pine Grove, privacy was becoming a rare commodity. "You're handling this really well," Elena told him over the phone one evening. "Better than I did when I first became public. I keep reminding myself it'll die down." "Eventually," Jack replied, watching through his window as another news van slowly cruised past his house. "Though I wish they'd stop calling me the Bee Whisperer." Elena's laugh warmed him even through the phone. "Better than what they call me. The Silicon Valley Sphinx was last week's favorite." The town itself was divided in its reaction. Some, like Martha at the community center, fiercely protected Jack's privacy, shooing away reporters with her trademark no-nonsense attitude. Others, sensing opportunity, were less discreet. Jack's former high school classmate, now a real estate agent, had already given 3 interviews about what Jack was really like in 10th grade. Sarah, surprisingly, became their family's media relations expert. "Dad, you have to give them something or they'll make stuff up," she advised wisely. "Just smile, say no comment to personal questions, and talk about the community center renovation if they push." She was right, of course. The more Jack and Elena focused on the community center project, the more the media narrative shifted from sensational romance to meaningful community investment. It didn't hurt that Elena had doubled the renovation budget, adding plans for a public library wing alongside the STEM lab, but it was Grace who finally gave the quote that changed the tone of coverage. Cornered by reporters outside her house, she looked directly into the cameras and said, "You all want a fairy tale? Here's your story. 2 people who've known loss and loneliness found each other because one was brave enough to help and the other was brave enough to let herself be helped. Everything else, the money, the bees, the headlines, that's just window dressing. The real story is about courage, and it's been there all along." The clip went viral, and suddenly the headlines shifted. "Tech CEO and local hero, a story of courage," read the next day's papers. Even the national media picked up Grace's angle, focusing on the authentic connection between Jack and Elena rather than the sensational aspects of their meeting. Through it all, Jack held on to the quiet moments. Elena teaching Sarah about coding. In their kitchen, late-night phone calls where they talked about everything and nothing, the way she still looked at him like he was something precious, camera flashes or not. "You know what's funny?" Elena mused during one of their calls. "For years, I hid from the public eye because I thought it would change how people saw me. But being with you and Sarah, it's teaching me that real connections survive any amount of outside pressure." Jack smiled, watching Sarah do her homework at the kitchen table, completely unfazed by the occasional camera flash outside their window. "Maybe that's the real story here," he said. "Not how our worlds collided, but how they're learning to coexist." "Speaking of coexisting," Elena said, "are you ready for tomorrow night?" Tomorrow, their first official public appearance together at the community center's groundbreaking ceremony. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jack replied, and found that he meant it. The gleaming headquarters of Chen Technologies rose like a crystal mountain against the Silicon Valley skyline. Jack stood in the vast lobby, feeling distinctly out of place in his best suit, the one he'd worn to parent-teacher conferences and job interviews. His visitor's badge, with its stark corporate logo, felt like a spotlight announcing his outsider status. Elena had insisted he come see her world, to understand the full scope of what dating her really meant. "No more secrets," she'd said. But standing here watching employees hurry past in designer clothes, tapping on tablets worth more than his monthly salary, Jack felt the gulf between their worlds more keenly than ever. "Mr. Morrison?" A young executive approached, her smile professionally warm. "I'm Jennifer, Ms. Chen's chief of staff. She's just wrapping up a board meeting. Would you like to wait in her office?" Eleanor's office occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the valley. Modern art adorned the walls, and a holographic display dominated one corner, showing real-time data from Chen Technologies' global operations. It was more like a command center than an office. "Impressive, isn't it?" Elena's voice came from behind him. She stood in the doorway, power and authority radiating from her tailored suit and confident stance. This was Elena Chen, the CEO, not the woman who'd sat in his kitchen last week, laughing as she tried to learn his meatball recipe. "It's something else," Jack managed, trying to reconcile these two versions of Elena in his mind. She crossed the room and took his hands, her touch immediately softening her corporate persona. "Too much?" "Just different," he admitted. "Very different from fixing leaky pipes and chasing teenagers away from the mall fountain." Elena's laugh echoed in the vast space. "Would it help if I told you I had to deal with a leaky pipe in the R&D department this morning, though admittedly it was leaking quantum coolant, not water?" Before Jack could respond, her office door burst open. A man in an expensive suit strode in, his face flushed with anger. "Elena, the board is still waiting for an answer about the merger." He stopped short at the sight of Jack. "Oh, you must be the maintenance man." The way he said it made Jack's spine stiffen, but Elena's voice cut through the tension like a steel blade. "Thomas, this is Jack Morrison." "Jack, meet Thomas Richardson, my COO. Who should know better than to barge into my office unannounced?" Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed, but his eyes still assessed Jack like he was evaluating a questionable investment. "Of course, my apologies. I just thought, given the sensitivity of the merger discussions—" "The merger can wait," Elena said firmly. "I'm having lunch with Jack. We can discuss business later." After Thomas left, Elena sighed. "I'm sorry about that. Thomas is brilliant at his job, but he tends to see everything through the lens of corporate advantage. He probably thinks you're some kind of security risk." "Aren't I?" Jack asked quietly. "A maintenance man dating the CEO of a tech empire. I'm sure your shareholders love that." Elena's face softened. "Jack, look at me." She led him to her desk and pulled up a file on her computer. "Do you know what this is? It's the community center's maintenance records for the past 5 years. Every repair you've made, every system you've kept running on a shoestring budget. You've shown more innovation and resource management than half my executives." She stood and walked to the window, gesturing at the sprawling campus below. "I built all this from nothing, you know. Started coding in my parents' garage, lived on ramen noodles through college. Everyone sees the end result, but they forget the journey." She turned back to him. "You remind me of who I used to be before all this, someone who solves problems not because it's profitable, but because it's necessary." Jack joined her at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. "It's not just the money," he said, "it's all of this. The power, the responsibility. Dating me complicates things for you." "Good," Elena said firmly. "My life could use some complications that aren't about market shares and board votes." She touched his cheek gently. "Besides, I think you're missing something important here." "What's that?" "You're not the only one wondering if they're good enough." She gestured around the office. "All this? It's just stuff. But what you have with Sarah, the way you've raised her, the respect you've earned in Pine Grove, that's real. Sometimes I wonder if I'm worthy of being part of that." For the first time that day, Jack smiled genuinely, because in that moment, he saw past the corporate armor to the woman who'd looked at him with such gratitude in a bee-filled orchard. Different worlds, yes, but maybe that was exactly what they both needed. Sarah's diary lay open on her desk, her normally neat handwriting uncharacteristically scattered across the page. "Everything's different now. Dad's different. The house is different. Even my friends are different. Kaylee only wants to talk about Ms. Chen's money, and Tommy keeps asking if I can get him the new Chen Technologies gaming system before it launches. I miss when things were normal. The changes had been subtle at first. New security cameras around the house, a sleek laptop. Appearing on her desk, "For your science projects," Elena had said. Reporters following her to soccer practice. But lately, the transformation of their quiet life had accelerated like a snowball rolling downhill. "Sarah?" Jack knocked on her door, finding her curled up in the window seat. "Grandma's here for dinner. Elena's joining us too. Can't we just have a normal family dinner?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "Like we used to." Jack sat beside her, noting the open diary. "Want to talk about it?" Sarah hugged her knees to her chest. "Madison's mom said you're only dating Elena for her money, and Principal Watson keeps asking me about the new STEM lab, like I'm in charge of it or something. And—" she hesitated. "Sometimes I feel like I'm sharing you with the whole world." "Now!" Downstairs, they heard the front door open, Elena's voice mixing with Grace's as they discussed dinner preparations. The sounds of their old life and new one merging, not always harmoniously. "I saw the college brochures Elena brought over," Sarah continued quietly. "Johns Hopkins, Stanford, Mayo Clinic. They're all places Mom wanted me to consider, but we knew we couldn't afford them. Now suddenly we can, and it feels like we're replacing old dreams with new ones," Jack finished gently. Sarah nodded, tears threatening. "I don't want to forget Mom, or who we were before." Jack reached for the framed photo on Sarah's desk, Rebecca holding a toddler Sarah on the beach, both of them laughing at something off-camera. "You know what your mom would say right now? She'd say that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Adding Elena to our lives doesn't subtract anything from our memories." "She'd probably make some horrible math joke about it too," Sarah said, managing a small smile. "Probably something about the quantum physics of love," Jack agreed. "She'd get along well with Elena that way." From downstairs, Elena's voice called, "Up, Jack, Sarah, the pasta's getting cold." Sarah wiped her eyes. "Elena's trying really hard, isn't she?" "She is. But you know what? It's okay to need time to adjust. It's okay to miss how things were and still be excited about how things could be." They headed downstairs to find Elena and Grace in the kitchen, attempting to recreate Jack's meatball recipe with questionable success. Elena had flour on her expensive blouse, and Grace was trying not to laugh at her determinedly serious approach to measuring spices. "A little help?" Elena pleaded when she saw them. "I think I'm doing something wrong with the garlic." "You're overthinking it," Grace said, taking the spoon from her. Cooking is more art than science. You can't code your way through it. Now you sound like my mother, Elena said, then caught herself, a flash of old pain crossing her face. You never talk about your parents, Sarah observed, moving to help with the sauce. Elena was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling on the counter. They died when I was young. Car accident. I was raised by my aunt, but she was more interested in my trust fund than in me. That's partly why I worked so hard to build the company, to prove I could do it on my own. The kitchen fell silent. The only sound, the bubbling of sauce on the stove. Then Sarah did something that surprised everyone. She hugged Elena. I'm sorry about your parents. Maybe we could both use some more family. Elena hugged her. In back, careful not to get flour on Sarah's clothes. I'd like that. Very much. Grace caught Jack's eye over the stove, giving him a knowing smile. Sometimes families came together in unexpected ways, pieced together from loss and hope and new beginnings. Now, Grace announced, breaking the emotional moment, let's see if we can save these meatballs before they become classified as a new form of technological innovation. As laughter filled the kitchen, Jack watched his daughter teaching a billionaire, tech CEO, the proper way to roll a meatball, and felt something settle in his heart. Change wasn't always easy, but sometimes it was exactly what a family needed to grow. The hostile takeover documents appeared on Elena's desk early on a Tuesday morning. Thomas Richardson's name was prominently displayed among the consortium of board members pushing for a vote of no confidence. The betrayal stung, but it was the timing that made Elena's blood run cold. They'd waited until she'd gone public with her relationship with Jack, using the media attention and questionable judgment as leverage. They're saying your recent behavior demonstrates emotional instability, James reported, his usual calm demeanor cracking. The B incident, the very public romance, the massive investment in a small-town community center, they're painting it as a middle-life crisis that's putting shareholder value at risk. Elena stood at her office window, watching the sunrise paint Silicon Valley in shades of gold. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Sarah made breakfast today, only slightly burned the toast. Progress. The simple domesticity of it made her throat tight. What are our options? She asked James. They've been planning this for months. They have proxy votes lined up, support from key investors. They're offering to let you keep your shares, but remove you from operational control. Thomas would become CEO. Elena's mind raced. She'd built this company from nothing, pouring 20 years of her life into it. The thought of Thomas Richardson, with his obsession with quarterly profits and disdain for real innovation, taking control, was unbearable. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo from Sarah, the prototype quantum computer diagram Elena had helped her draw for science class. Got an A+! Best science teacher ever! Something clicked in Elena's mind. Get me everything you can on Richardson's recent stock trades, and call Jack. I need him here. Jack, but trust me. 3 hours later, Jack arrived at Chen Technologies, looking concerned. Elena, what's wrong? She led him to her private conference room, where screens displayed financial data and stock movements. I need your help, not as my boyfriend, but as someone who sees patterns others miss. She explained the situation, watching Jack's face carefully. He absorbed it all with the same focused attention he gave to complex repair jobs at the community center. Show me Richardson's trading history again, he said finally. For the next hour, they pored over the data. Jack asked questions no corporate analyst would think to ask, looking at the problem from angles that would never occur to MBA graduates. There, he said suddenly, pointing to a series of transactions. It's like that time at the community center when the basketball court kept flooding. Everyone focused on the obvious leak, but the real problem was 3 halls away where a pipe had cracked underground. You're looking at the wrong pattern. Elena leaned in, following his logic. The shell companies, they're not just hiding voter proxies. They're hiding a bigger play, Jack finished. He's not just trying to take over Chen Technologies. He's trying to strip it for parts. James, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up sharply. The quantum computing division. If he splits it off, he could sell it to our competitors for billions, Elena realized. That's why he's been blocking our integration initiatives. He wants the divisions to be easy to separate. She turned to Jack, amazement in her eyes. How did you see it? He shrugged. When you're used to fixing things with limited resources, you learn to look for the real problem, not just the obvious one. Richardson isn't after control. He's after a payday, and he's using your relationship with me as cover for his real plan. Elena's phone rang, the board chairman, probably calling about the emergency meeting scheduled for tomorrow. She let it go to voicemail, her mind already racing with possibilities. James, get me the quantum team's latest integration reports. And call legal. I want to know if those shell companies violate SEC disclosure rules. She turned to Jack. Will, you stay? I could use your perspective. Jack hesitated. Are you sure? This is your world, not mine. Elena took his hand. When you saved me from those bees, you didn't stop to wonder if you were qualified. You saw someone in trouble and found a way to help. That's exactly what I need right now. Someone who sees past all the corporate complexity to what really matters. For the first time since the crisis began, she felt her confidence returning. With Jack's practical wisdom and her technical knowledge, they might just find a way through this. More importantly, she realized that their different worlds weren't a weakness. They were a strength. As James began organizing the counteroffensive, Elena received another text from Sarah. Dad there yet? Give him a hug from me. And remember what you told me about quantum entanglement. Sometimes the strongest connections are the ones you can't see. Elena smiled. Out of the mouths of babes came wisdom that even corporate raiders couldn't comprehend. Late that night in Elena's penthouse apartment, she sat at her desk writing a letter by hand, something she hadn't done in years. The corporate crisis had crystallized something in her mind, something she needed to express in more than just pixels and data. Dear Jack, by the time you read this, you'll know if we succeeded or failed in saving my company, but that's not what this letter is about. Today, watching you break down complex financial schemes with the same careful attention you give to fixing broken pipes, I realize something important. I've spent my life building walls, corporate frameworks, security protocols, emotional barriers. Then you came along and showed me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tear them down. I love you, not because you saved me from bees or helped save my company. I love you because you repair things, not just with tools, but with patience and wisdom and care. You've started repairing parts of me I didn't even know were broken. A knock at her door interrupted her writing. Jack stood there, still in his suit from earlier, looking somewhat rumpled but determined. Sarah's with Grace, he said before she could ask. I couldn't go home without talking to you first. Elena set down her pen. About tomorrow's board meeting? About us. He entered the apartment, but remained standing. Elena, if this goes wrong, tomorrow, if you lose the company, I need you to know that it doesn't change anything for me. If you end up running a global tech empire or teaching coding at Pine Grove High, I'll still... He paused, gathering courage. I'll still love you. The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Elena stood slowly, moving toward him. When did you know? She asked softly. Remember last week, when you spent 3 hours helping Sarah debug her science project code? You didn't take a single business call. You just sat there, patient and focused, teaching her about loops and variables. That's when I knew. Elena touched his face gently. For me, it was watching you with the community center kids. The way you know all their names, their stories, how you fix their bikes and listen to their problems. You treat everyone like they matter. They do matter. See, that's exactly it. She took his hand, leading him to her desk where the half-finished letter lay. I was just writing to you, trying to explain. In my world, everything is measured. in market cap and user metrics, but you measure things in moments of connection, in problems solved, in lives improved. Jack picked up the letter, reading what she'd written. His face softened. Elena, when Thomas and the board question my judgment tomorrow, I'm going to tell them the truth. Meeting you didn't cloud my judgment, it clarified it. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Not to make money, but to solve problems, to make things better. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. This is my counter-proposal for tomorrow. Instead of splitting up the company, we integrate everything, quantum computing, AI, clean energy, into solutions for real-world problems, starting with making technology accessible to communities like Pine Grove. Jack read through the proposal, understanding dawning in his eyes. This isn't just about saving your company, this is about transforming it into something that matters, Elena finished. Something Sarah would be proud to be part of someday, if she wants to. Jack set down the proposal and pulled Elena into his arms. They stood there in comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling below them like earthbound stars. Whatever happens tomorrow, Elena whispered against his chest, thank you for showing me that sometimes the biggest innovations don't come from laboratories or boardrooms. They come from having the courage to let someone in. Jack kissed her softly. Thank you for showing Sarah that dreams don't have to have limits. Elena smiled, thinking of the unfinished letter on her desk. She didn't need to complete it now. Everything that mattered had already been said, not in words on paper, but in the quiet moments of trust and understanding they'd built together. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, corporate raiders, hostile takeovers, board votes. But tonight was about a different kind of merger, one where two people from different worlds chose to build something new together, something that was greater than the sum of its parts. The strategy whiteboard in Elena's office had become a battlefield map. Complex diagrams, stock ownership percentages, and corporate structure flowcharts covered its surface, with Jack's practical annotations added in different colors. Follow the money was underlined twice in red marker, a simple principle that had helped unravel Richardson's complex scheme. The shell companies all trace back to a single holding corporation in the Cayman Islands, James reported, adding another connection to the board. And guess who's been meeting with our biggest competitor's CEO? Richardson, Elena and Jack said simultaneously. Elena paced the office, while Jack studied the whiteboard intently. The morning sun cast long shadows across the floor. The board, meeting just hours away. We have the evidence of his double dealing, Elena said, but he'll claim it was all preliminary research, nothing concrete. We need something more. Sometimes, Jack said slowly, the best way to fix a problem isn't to attack it head-on. He pointed to a section of the diagram. Look at how he structured these shell companies. It's like that time the community center's heating system failed. The real issue wasn't the furnace, it was the thermostat sending wrong signals. Elena's eyes lit up. The voting proxies. If we can prove he misrepresented his intentions to the shareholders, exactly. He's not just planning to split the company, he's actively deceiving investors about the true value of the quantum computing division. James was already typing furiously on his tablet. I can have the SEC filings analyzed within the hour. If there are discrepancies, there will be, Jack said confidently. People like Richardson always leave traces. They're so focused on the big score that they get sloppy with the details. Elena watched Jack work, marveling at how naturally he applied his maintenance supervisor's problem-solving skills to corporate warfare. He had an intuitive understanding of systems, whether mechanical or financial, that cut through layers of complexity to find the core issue. Sarah had texted earlier, "Good luck at the board meeting. Remember what you taught me about quantum superposition. Sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects to see until they look for it." Elena? Jack's voice brought her back to the present. "I think I found something else," he pointed. to a series of transactions. These dates, did they line up with the community center renovation announcements? Richardson wasn't just using our relationship as cover, he was counting on it. What do you mean? He needed a distraction, something to make the board focus on your personal life instead of his dealings. Our story was perfect. The media ate it up and nobody was paying attention to his quiet consolidation of power. Elena felt a cold anger settle in her chest. Richardson hadn't just betrayed her professionally. He'd tried to weaponize her chance. At Happiness, a knock at the door announced the arrival of her legal team. The head counsel, Patricia Wong, carried a stack of documents that made James's eyes widen. "We found it," Patricia announced. Richardson's proxy statements to shareholders omitted crucial information about the quantum computing division's integration. Progress. He deliberately misrepresented the potential split-up costs. "Meaning?" Jack asked. "Meaning he's exposed to SEC violations and potential shareholder lawsuits. If we present this at the board meeting—" "No," Elena interrupted, a plan forming in her mind. "We don't present it at the meeting, not right away." She turned to Jack. "What would you do if you were fixing something and caught someone deliberately sabotaging your work?" A slow smile spread across Jack's face. "I'd give them just enough. Rope to hang themselves." Elena nodded. "Patricia, prepare the documents, but keep them sealed. James, make sure Richardson sees us looking worried before the meeting. Let him think his plan is working." "And then," James asked, "and then we let him present his grand vision to the board. Let him lay out his entire scheme. Only after he's fully committed do we show our hand." Jack added another note to the whiteboard. "The best repair job is the one that fixes the underlying problem, not just the symptom." Elena squeezed his hand. "Ready to watch a corporate raider get a lesson in basic maintenance?" "Wouldn't miss it," Jack replied. "Though I should warn you, in my experience, when you corner something dangerous, that's when it fights hardest." Elena looked at their reflection in the window, the tech CEO and the maintenance supervisor preparing for battle together. "Good thing I have my own personal hero then. You're pretty experienced with handling dangerous situations." "Just remember," Jack said softly, "no matter what happens in there, you've already won the most important fight, which is, you remembered who you really are and what your company stands for." Richardson never understood that some things can't be bought or sold. They can only be built, one careful repair at a time. The Chen Technologies boardroom hummed with tension. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the faces of board members as they took their seats around the massive table. The minutes of the meeting lay before each person, innocent-looking documents that were about to become historical records. Thomas Richardson sat near the head of the table, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence. His eyes narrowed slightly when Jack entered behind Elena, but his smirk remained firmly in place. "Ms. Chen," he said smoothly, "I wasn't aware we were allowing outside observers." "Mr. Morrison is here at my request," Elena replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had built her empire, "as someone who understands the value of maintaining what's important." Jack took his seat near the back of the room, catching the subtle emphasis in her words. Their plan hinged on timing and on Richardson's own arrogance. "Very well," Richardson stood, commanding the room's attention. "We're here today because recent events have raised serious concerns about the direction of Chen Technologies under its current leadership." He clicked a remote, bringing up a series of charts on the wall screen. Ms. Chen's recent behavior, her impulsive decisions, her public romance, her emotional investment in small-town projects demonstrates a concerning pattern. Elena sat calmly, letting him build his case. Jack watched her hands, steady on the table, showing no sign of the tension he knew she felt. "The quantum computing division alone represents billions in untapped value," Richardson continued. "Value that's being squandered on community centers and feel-good projects while our competitors advance. I propose a strategic restructuring." "You mean a structured dismantling?" Elena interrupted quietly. Why don't you tell them about your meetings with Quantum Dynamics' CEO? Richardson's rhythm faltered for just a moment. I meet with many industry leaders. It's part of due diligence. Of course, Elena smiled. Just like incorporating shell companies in the Cayman Islands is due diligence. Please continue. You were explaining your vision for the company's future. Something dangerous flashed in Richardson's eyes, but he pressed on, outlining his plan for splitting the company. Jack recognized the moment Elena had predicted. Richardson was fully committing himself, too invested now to back down. The numbers speak for themselves, Richardson concluded. This restructuring could triple shareholder value overnight. I move for an immediate vote on new leadership. Before we vote, Elena stood, her presence filling the room. I have a question. When you prepared the proxy statements for your shareholder coalition, did you include the integration progress reports from the quantum computing division? Those reports are preliminary. They show that splitting the division would cost 5 times your projected figures, Elena continued. Did you disclose that? Or the fact that you've already promised exclusive rights to our quantum architecture to Quantum Dynamics? The room erupted in murmurs. Richardson's face darkened. These are baseless accusations. No, Jack spoke up from the back, his clear voice cutting through the chaos. They're maintenance records. Every system leaves traces when it's tampered with. You just have to know where to look. Elena nodded to James, who distributed sealed documents to each board member. Full documentation of Mr. Richardson's undisclosed dealings, including SEC violations and breach of fiduciary duty. But, more importantly, she clicked her own remote, changing the display. This is my vision for Chen Technology's future. The screen filled with images, the Pine Grove Community Center's STEM lab, young students working with quantum computing simulations, a network of innovation centers spreading across small towns and underserved communities. We didn't build this company to maximize quarterly profits. Elena's voice filled with passion. We built it to solve problems, to make quantum computing accessible, to change lives. And yes, I fell in love with the maintenance supervisor who taught me that the most valuable innovations are the ones that help real people. She faced the board directly. You have a choice today. You can strip this company for parts, cash out, for a quick profit, or you can be part of something transformative. Because quantum computing isn't just about processing power. It's about seeing all the possibilities at once and choosing the best path forward. Richardson slammed his hand on the table. This is emotional manipulation. She's letting sentiment cloud. No, one of the oldest board members interrupted. She's remembering why we invested in her vision in the first place. He turned to Elena. I vote to retain current leadership and fully investigate Mr. Richardson's activities. The vote that followed wasn't even close. As security escorted a seething Richardson from the boardroom, Jack caught Elena's eye and smiled. Sometimes the best victories weren't about destroying your opponent, but about fixing what was broken, in companies and in hearts. Spring blossoms filled the air as workers put the finishing touches on the renovated Pine Grove Community Center. The new sign gleamed in the morning sun. Chen Morrison Innovation Hub, though Elena had to fight Jack for months to let her include his name. Sarah stood in the doorway of the STEM lab, her face glowing with pride as she prepared to guide the first tour group of elementary school students. At 13, she'd been appointed the center's youngest ever junior instructor, teaching basic coding to kids after school. Ready for the big day? Jack asked, adjusting the collar of her new lab coat. A gift from Elena. Almost. Sarah fidgeted. With her name badge. Do you think Mom would be proud of all of this? Jack pulled her into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo mixed with the new paint smell of the building. She'd be bursting with pride, kiddo. Just like I am. Elena appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, looking somehow both corporate and casual in jeans and a blazer. The quantum computing simulation is online, she announced. Though I had to talk the board out of installing a full quantum processor, Apparently, they're very excited about our community innovation initiative. The past 3 months had transformed more than just the community center. After Richardson's departure, Chen Technologies had launched similar innovation hubs in small towns across the country. Elena split her time between Silicon Valley and Pine Grove, working remotely when possible and flying back for major meetings. "Ms. Chen," a young girl's voice called from the hallway. "Can you help me with my science project? It's about bees." Elena laughed. "Duty calls. Sarah, want to help? You're the expert on teaching now." As they left together, Jack wandered through the building that had become a symbol of transformation. The old basketball court now doubled as a presentation space, with state-of-the-art projection systems. The leaky pool had been renovated with solar heating. Even his maintenance office had been upgraded, though he'd insisted on keeping his old tool cabinet. Some things weren't meant to be replaced, just preserved and treasured. "Quite a change, isn't it?" Grace's voice came from behind him. She carried a tray of her famous chocolate chip cookies for the opening ceremony. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming," Jack admitted. "A year ago, I was worried about fixing the furnace with duct tape and prayers." Grace set down the cookies and took his arm. "Life has a way of surprising us. Rebecca knew that. Remember how she always said everything happens for a reason?" Jack nodded, remembering countless conversations with his late wife about fate and timing. She would have loved Elena, wouldn't she? Oh, those two would have been thick as thieves, plotting ways to change the world. Grace squeezed his arm. "She sent Elena to you, you know, I'm sure of it." Before Jack could respond, they heard excited voices from the main entrance. The first group of families had arrived for the opening ceremony. Sarah was already in her element, explaining the center's new features to wide-eyed children, while Elena watched proudly from the background. A photographer from the local paper captured the moment, Sarah demonstrating a simple robot, Elena helping. A young girl with coding, Jack and Grace watching it all unfold. The next day's headline would read, "Local hero's dream becomes reality. Innovation comes to Pine Grove." But the real story wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet moments. Elena teaching Sarah quantum physics over dinner. Grace and Elena swapping recipes and life advice. Jack finally hiring an assistant maintenance supervisor so he could take real vacations with his expanding family. The new family portrait on their wall captured it perfectly. Jack and Elena in the center, Sarah between them, Grace beside them, all of them laughing at something just out of frame. And next to it, never forgotten, the photo of Rebecca at the beach, her smile blessing this new chapter of their lives. "Jack," Elena called from across the room, "we're ready to start the ceremony." He joined her at the podium, still amazed at how natural it felt to stand beside her. The crowd gathered. Town officials, excited children, proud parents, Chen Technologies executives who'd flown in for the occasion. "A year ago," Elena began her speech, her hand finding Jack's. "A swarm of bees changed my life. They led me to a man who taught me that the greatest innovations often come from the simplest acts of courage and care." As she spoke, Jack watched Sarah in the audience, her face shining with the light of unlimited possibilities. Sometimes the best new beginnings grew from the strongest foundations, like a quantum leap that somehow brought you exactly where you were meant to be. The old Miller orchard had been transformed. Apple trees strung with twinkling lights created natural archways, and wooden chairs lined a path through the grass where Jack had once rushed to save Elena from killer bees. At the center stood an arch adorned with honeysuckle and apple blossoms, and atop the wedding cake perched a whimsical bee-shaped topper. Sarah's idea, of course. Elena had refused the grand ceremony her board expected, choosing instead this intimate gathering under the trees that had witnessed their beginning. She stood now in Grace's living room, wearing a simple white dress that would have shocked the fashion magazines, expecting designer glamour. "Something borrowed," Grace said softly, pinning Rebecca's antique pearl brooch to Elena's dress. She, who wore it at her own wedding, Elena touched the brooch gently. "Thank you for everything, for sharing your family with me." Sarah burst in, practically dancing in her junior bridesmaid dress. "Dad's pacing in the garden. I think he's nervous about his vows." "Go tell him to breathe," Grace instructed with a smile. "And remind him that Elena already said yes to the hard part, loving both of you forever." As Sarah darted out, Elena caught a glimpse of the orchard through the window. Instead of corporate executives and social elite, the seats were filled with community center kids and their families, Pine Grove neighbors, and the people who had become her real board of directors in life's most important decisions. The ceremony itself was simple and profound. Jack waited under the arch, looking handsome and slightly overwhelmed in his new suit. Sarah stood beside him, holding both their rings and beaming with joy. When Elena appeared at the end of the aisle, escorted by James, who had long since become more friend than employee, Jack's face lit up with the same wonder she'd seen when he first truly saw her in Grace's living room after the bee attack. Their vows were personal and genuine. Jack spoke about second chances and the courage to love again. Elena talked about learning that true innovation meant opening your heart to unexpected possibilities. And Sarah, in an unplanned moment that brought tears to every eye, stepped forward to make her own vow. "I promise to be the best daughter to both of you," she said clearly, "and I know Mom is watching and smiling because her family has grown in love, just like she always taught me it should." The bee-topped cake was cut, champagne was poured, and as the stars began to appear above the orchard, Jack and Elena shared their first dance to the same song that had played on the community center radio the day they'd first worked together. On renovation plans, Grace caught the moment on camera, Jack and Elena swaying beneath the twinkling lights, Sarah joining them halfway through the dance, all three laughing as she taught them the steps to a dance she'd learned in school. It wasn't the society wedding the media had anticipated, but it was something far more precious, a celebration of love that had grown from courage, blossomed through understanding, and transformed three lives into a family bound by choice as, much as chance, the photograph would join their growing collection at home, another chapter in their story that began with bees and ended with belonging. 1 year later, the Morrison Foundation for Innovation and Community Development opened its doors. The Foundation's first initiative, a nationwide program supporting single parents in STEM careers, inspired by both Jack's journey and Elena's own past. Sarah, now 14, stood at the podium during the launch event, confidently presenting her research on sustainable energy to a room full of tech leaders and community organizers. Her project had grown from a simple science fair entry into a pilot program for affordable solar heating in low-income communities. In the audience, Jack and Elena sat hand in hand, their proud smiles matching Grace's in the front row. Chigadia still occasionally ran stories about the billionaire bee romance, but they'd moved on to focusing on the Foundation's impact instead. Jack continued his work at the community center, refusing a corporate position, but happily serving as the Foundation's technical advisor. His practical wisdom had already helped launch innovation hubs in 50 small towns across the country. Elena split her time between running Chen Technologies and mentoring young innovators, often saying that she'd found her true calling in combining cutting-edge technology with community needs. The quantum computing division, rather than being sold off, had become a leader in educational technology, making advanced concepts accessible to students everywhere. Their home remained in Pine Grove, where the apple orchard had been restored to its former glory. And if visitors noticed a particular fondness for bee-friendly flowers in the garden, well, that was just another part of their story. One that proved that sometimes the sweetest endings come from life's unexpected turns, and that love, like innovation, thrives best when it grows from the heart.